Welcome to another episode of Recharging the Human Battery. I'm your favorite orthopedic spine surgeon, Dr. Sinicropi. We are on AM 950 radio. Today I thought I would answer some of your questions. Now, recently, I have been all over social media, and I don't, hold anything back, because we are in a really bad place right now when it comes to you guys getting the information that you need to make actual informed decisions as far as your health, where you're going with your life, whether you end up being an active grandpa or grandma, or whether you end up sitting in a wheelchair staring at a brick wall, wondering if things could have been different while you get, visited, once a month by your family. I know I'm not trying to be grim, but if people are just so lost in this system that is absolutely been overtaken by, big corporations, it's completely overtaken our minds. We're making decisions that are absolutely not in our best interest. And unfortunately, so many people are turning over their entire life to the traditional Western medical system. And while, again, I'm going to say it for the 1,000th time, it saved millions of people. I always throw that in there because it's just true. Unfortunately, it is failing so many others, with every chronic disease on the rise, people not feeling well, people, just going back to the same well, which really doesn't, necessarily make any sense at all. So I've been out here just pounding away at the fact that you've got to be CEOs of your own health. I know you've heard me say this many times. I don't know how else to just keep continually. I'm just going to keep saying the same thing over and over again. Take over your own life. Take over your own life. What do I mean by the whole informed consent thing? This is one of the biggest reasons why I am so vocal about these options that are outside traditional, medical care. That's the following. If, let's just say that you go in and somebody suggests something like a total hip replacement or some other, procedure, and we like to say things like, hey, they've exhausted all possible options. And so when we start talking like that, when we've exhausted all possible options, when a patient is consented for an operation, yes. And I'm not just talking about operation. I'm talking about so many different things. Consented to be on a medication, for psychiatric, whatever it might be. The problem is that, to me, it's not truly informed consent if you are not informed really about what the other options are. If you are misled to believe that the other options are a bunch of hocus pocus, then obviously you are not going to even explore that. You may not even say, the doctor said that doesn't do anything, so I'm not going to look into that. And most times, neither the patient brings it up nor the person that they are seeing, because they might not even be familiar with some of the things that are really out here. So again, I'm not picking on any providers or anything like that. Listen, I've been there before, right? But what I'm saying is that to have truly informed consent, and I think you would agree with me, you actually need to know what the options are outside of what you're being recommended. And I'm spending, days in this integrative health clinic listening to people that have gone a certain direction, not even knowing why they were going that direction, not getting better, upset because they went in a certain direction. And all I hear all the time is, oh, I didn't know about that. I didn't know about this. I didn't know about the other thing. And so again, they're going down certain paths, but if we're not really informing the people, and most of the times it's because we ourselves don't know, if we're not informing them at least of general buckets, and whatever the barriers are to informing them doesn't matter. Bottom line is they are signing up for things and they don't really understand that maybe there's other things they can try. So today, really good questions as I've been out here really pounding the table on some of these ideas. I'm going to try to go through, some of your questions. I can't answer, are they literally thousands in the last couple of months, but I will go through a few of them. I picked them almost, randomly, just they're interesting questions. We'll go through them on the other side of the break. This is AM 950 radio. This is Recharging the Human Battery. See you on the other side. Welcome back. We're on Recharging the Human Battery Radio. I'm Dr. Sinicropi. This is AM 950. So again, on the other side of the break, I just keep repeating the same things over and over again. And I hope that you're not getting sick of hearing this, but you're going to keep hearing it. So, you've got to choose to keep listening. And I'm going to choose to keep trying to educate and move people forward. I mean, recently on social media, you guys have had some phenomenal questions about all kinds of stuff. Things we've been covering are peptides. Peptides are extraordinarily controversial, but interestingly enough, there are so many people doing them. And the fact that a lot of providers are not understanding how peptides work, how they might interact, it makes no sense, because if you're a primary care provider and your patients are actually sourcing peptides from and we don't recommend this at all, but if they're sourcing peptides because everybody and their cousin is selling them on the internet, getting them from pharmacies, which may or may not be licensed. Again, I'm not trying to pick on any particular pharmacy. I don't know what these research pharmacies do. I don't oversee them. They're not 503B pharmacies, so they're not regulated like that. So anyway, bottom line is, a lot of you are taking all these peptides, and that's why I'm always really careful to say, it's for educational purposes only. I'm a big believer in peptides, but I'm also a big believer that if you're going to get peptides, you absolutely have to get them through your provider. That doesn't have to be a physician, but it has to be somebody, a medical person that can actually write a prescription for you, and then you can get it through a licensed pharmacy. Now, it's going to get a lot easier because 14 out of the 19 peptides which were on the ban list are actually now going to slip over into the category 1 section, which means that they're absolutely going to be able to be sourced from really high-end compounding pharmacies, and that's great. Again, this isn't medical advice. I'm not telling you to take these peptides. However, there are very substantial benefits from some of them, but you got to really, really be careful with how you dose them. I just give you an example. The last clinic that I did, there was a couple patients. Again, I'm not going to get into the specifics of all these things, because I really want you to do your own research and actually talk to your providers. But there was a couple patients in my last clinic that I did at the Integrative Health Clinic that really wanted peptides, but they had a contraindication to the peptides. And here's the deal: because this is something that I study, that I talk about, that we do very deep dives on. I know this, right? The people might not know it. So if those folks had decided to take it upon their own hands, I get this question asked all the time. And I see it. I mean, it's all over my comments where people are taking these quote unquote stacks of peptides without any medical supervision. Those two patients, I'm not saying that they would have had a catastrophic thing, but they definitely had contraindications for the peptides that they wanted to be on. So we didn't put them on them, and we chose to go a different direction, which was very, very safe for them without taking those risks. And so again, if somebody is a primary care doc or any type of doc that's seeing patients, and your patients are coming to you and they're telling you you're on peptides, and you're just blowing them off, or cannot have a conversation with them because you don't understand the mechanisms and how they may interact with other things, well, how are you doing them any service? So I think that this is why when I talk about peptides on social, I get it like an absolute barrage of questions on what to do with this and what to do with that. Okay, so let's go like to one of the most popular questions. This isn't even a specific question. I have a list here in front of me of a bunch of your questions, but I'm going to tell you something that comes up constantly, right? And that is I'm going to just repeat what I said before. The question is, should I do this stack or that stack from this research pharmacy? First of all, the answer, unfortunately, is no, because you really shouldn't do that. You really should source it from the correct sources. And I think that you really need to read. There are enough providers or experts now in peptide management that you should seek someone out for specific understanding. Okay. There's no absolutely. So we'll cut that off. The next one is, there's a lot of questions when it comes to the peptides, specifically on a little bit of pushback because of peptides being sold in providers' offices, whether they be physicians, nurses, nurse practitioners, whatever. I can tell you this, I think there's a misunderstanding. I understand And I'm just going to speak broadly. I don't know what other people, are charging. I know our prices at our clinic are very, very low. It's not like a big price. I just want people to understand, because they say that. They say, oh, the cost of this peptide is this. Why am I doing this? It should be free, or it should be very cheap, or whatever. But basically, it's a pushback on the, kind of their whatever clinic they're in. And again, I get stuff from all over the country. And again, I don't know what exact price. Some of them tell me what prices, but generally, I don't know what prices they are, charging. But I can tell you that these clinics, all the clinics, they're making very, very little, profit on these peptides. So I think it's a lot better to go through the clinics where you're going to have a provider that is going to be able to take you through it and understands your other medical conditions, understands systems, biology, physiology, pharmacology, etc., rather than saying, hey, I can get it cheaper and I'm going to go to this unsourced, pharmacy. You might be sourcing it from other countries where there's zero, checks on purity or anything like that. So you could be putting yourself at risk. So I think better to pay a little bit more of a premium than do that. Plus, then you get to have the actual medical consultation and have an overview and a general, look at, what's going on, and how that doctor, nurse practitioner, whoever you're seeing, can actually help you. Next question is, doctor, should I be taking any type of peptides to enhance my brain function after a traumatic brain injury? So this is a very specific, question that I've gotten a bunch of them. This was just a very straightforward way of asking. I talk a lot about traumatic brain injuries, otherwise known as, concussion. We call concussions MTBIs, mild traumatic brain injuries. So I can tell you, we take a multimodal approach. So before I get into the peptides, and again, everything here is for educational purposes. I'm not giving you medical advice. These things have to be supervised, especially if if you have a medical problem. You really need to see a provider that's an expert in that particular field. So the way we handle the concussion issue is we take definitely a multi-pronged approach at it. So we address it with light therapies to the brain called photobiomodulation to increase blood flow, improve mitochondrial function, reconnect the nerve cells together, something called synaptogenesis. We do oxygen therapies, which have a long history of being studied for brain injuries. We do supplementation. One of the most common things that I see is the lack of the most basic two things to supplement when somebody has a brain injury. And this is real important. It's very simple. It's very cheap. So there's no excuse not to do this. Number one, we've got to boost your vitamin D levels up to relatively high levels, more where the endocrinology associations recommend people to be anyway, but you want to have your vitamin D levels fairly high, range of normal versus low or even normal. Why? Because it's crystal clear that when people have vitamin D deficiencies, they are much more likely, if they have an acute concussion, to become chronic, and they are much more likely not to be able to heal their concussion because their vitamin D levels are low. This isn't like something that we think, or it's a general guideline, or hey, we want your vitamin D. It might be. No, this is really hardcore science, based on it's just data. And so we've got to get your vitamin D levels up higher. My last clinic, I saw 5 patients that had concussion, 0, not one single vitamin D level checked by another provider, not one. Some had this concussion for 2 years. Not a single time did they check their vitamin D level. This should just be a known thing. The next thing is creatine. Now, I've talked about creatine quite a bit. Creatine is involved in increasing energy in the brain. One of the things that happens when you have a traumatic brain injury is that the amount of power that your brain can generate goes down. Now, the brain is only a couple pounds, right? It's only a couple pounds. It's not that much. Very light tissue. It generates it absorbs 20% of the energy that's created right in the body. 20%. organ, because it's the way we perceive the world. It's our consciousness. It's all that stuff. So when people have traumatic brain injuries or any other kind of brain disease, they cannot produce power. And so creatine helps us to produce power. So typically people think about creatine as something that we give to people to increase their muscles, increase strength, things like that. Bodybuilders do it. A lot of athletes take creatine, and that is all true. And we can do an entire show on supplementation for athletic performance. However, what's not known is, so the typical dosage there is about 5 grams, sometimes up to 10. Well, I'll tell you, once you get to the 10-gram level and above, there are so many studies that have come out recently that then show a tremendous benefit to brain functioning. Now, I think I've talked about it before on this show. If you give creatine, for example, to people that are sleep deprived, their cognitive function goes almost back to where they would be normally. Not quite, but pretty good. And so it is something that if you're a surgeon and you're up all night, or you're a pilot and you haven't slept enough, even though I know there's like really great rules there, anybody, you're a busy mom, your kids, crying all night, you're up all night, you have a million tasks to do the next day. Creatine supplementation, again, make sure you do your own research and whatnot, but after 10 grams, after the muscles are saturated, guess what? It crosses the blood-brain barrier, tremendous benefits for the brain. So in concussion or traumatic brain injury, there is absolutely, unless there's a specific contraindication, there's no reason not to give people creatine. So the takeaway here is creatine and vitamin D. That's the basis. Now, I'll finish off with peptides, then we'll get to kind of the next topic. So when it comes to peptides, let's go back to what peptides are, because some of you guys might not have heard me talking about this before. Peptides are between 2 and 50 amino acids together. Amino acids, one structure. If you're over 50 amino acids, that's a protein. So the reason that peptides are so powerful is because they're small, so they can get to places where some proteins can't get. So there's something called the blood-brain barrier. The blood-brain barrier prevents a bunch of different things from getting into that area, because it would cause all kinds of trouble, inflammation, and so on. Because some peptide molecules are really small, they can cross the blood-brain barrier. This is really an advantage that we have. So there are specific peptides that can be used in the setting of concussion. I'm just going to say a couple. Again, this isn't for medical advice. We can go through some of the actual mechanisms of them on a different show. If you guys are interested, just let me know. So they're called nootropics. Okay, they're peptides that enhance brain functioning. So why would we not do that in the setting of traumatic brain injury? So there's a peptide called Semax. Okay. And that one, it makes people more alert and more energetic. So we want to give that to people that kind of have more of a kind of a depressed effect after having a traumatic brain injury or whatever. We use this in a lot of different, conditions. Again, a lot of this is off-label. Consult your provider. There's something called Cellank. Cellank is the opposite. Cellank is almost like a natural, what we call anxiolytic, which relaxes you, but also enhances brain function. So Cellank, we give to people that have a lot of high anxiety because of what they're going through. So if you're somebody that's like really like tightly wired or very anxious or just can't relax, then Cellank is something that we can help to give to try to rebuild the brain while it's trying to recover, but at the same time kind of relax you. Okay, there's something called cerebrolysin, which can be something that can kind of directly help in the repair of brain cells. Again, we'll get into the mechanisms on a different show. Another one that we commonly use, and I'm going to get to we're going to get to the next question. This is really interesting question that this goes around and round in loops, but one of the most commonly used peptides, period, is something called BPC 157. I've actually talked about it before on this show. It's called Body Protection Compound 157. The reason it became famous is because if you cut a tendon in a rodent and you give it BPC 157, you get rapid healing of the tendon. The tendons heal 40% faster. And so with data like that, and also other studies, mostly done in animals, it's tremendous what the benefits. And the way BPC 157 works is it actually creates a process called angiogenesis. So angiogenesis is the formation of new blood vessels. When you get new blood vessels, it is through the blood that a lot of the repair materials for rebuilding brain cells, nerve cells happen. So BPC 157 is something that not only can be considered, I want to say considered, because again, these are off-label uses of things. You can consider it in general orthopedic issues or musculoskeletal, whatever you want to call it. But you also is something that could be considered in brain injuries and nerve injuries, because again, you're bringing those natural building blocks. It's like building a home. You're not just going to, but somebody has to cut down the trees to get the wood and then deliver it to the home. So that's how the circulatory system works. You have all these things in the blood that go there, including your immune system cells that then get to that area and create healing. Now we got to be really careful because it creates new blood vessels. This is something where if there's a recent cancer, any kind of cancer going on, and even distant cancer, sometimes depending on what it is, that can be an absolute contraindication to use BPC 157. So you got to be real careful with it. And that's why I do worry of all these people going online and just buying these things and just taking them randomly and not understanding how it can interact with other, with their body, obviously, if it's promoting, growth of things, but also how it can, affect other medications. All right. BPC 157. This is something that brings up one of the more controversial things in peptides. And again, I'm looking at a particular question, but to be honest with you, it's similar to so many different questions. There are, I would say, about 90% of your comments. People want to know, like, oh, when should I use it? Oh, my doctor doesn't know about it, or I'm taking it for this reason, or I'm doing this and that. Again, my answer is always like, educational purposes only. Contact somebody. But BPC 157. I talk about it, quite a bit because there's so much potential for it. Now, the pushback, the 10% of people are like, where are the studies? Where are the randomized, controlled, blinded studies? Blah blah blah. Here's the deal. We all love randomized, controlled, blinded studies. We all love them. The problem with a lot of these peptides is that there is not money to do the randomized controlled studies. So unfortunately, we need to rely on evidence, and when sometimes it's anecdotal evidence. But I will tell you that when you have anecdotal evidence, but it is in a massive amount, that is something to be considered as well. So let me give you an example. If you ask 10 people if they feel better when they take a walk, right? And 9 of them out of 10 say they feel amazing after they take a walk. Is it more or less likely that is just placebo, or is it more likely that that's real? That's what I'm getting at. So I'm gonna now go to the other thing. So if I call 10 experts in the country right now, I just call 10 experts that are using, let's just say they're using BPC 157 on their patients, and out of 10 of them, 9 of them say the healing is so dramatic in their patients that they are almost, when they started using it, they're shocked, and it's something now they've been using in their clinics for 3 or 4 years. If 9 out of 10 people tell me that, and they're expert and they're physicians, right, my colleagues, is that a placebo? Do they all have this effect? Are they all convincing themselves? Because these are people that try a lot of different things on their patients, but yet that one makes their patients better. So again, yes, I'm going to agree with the critics that say that there aren't these, randomized controlled styles on BPC 157. I will tell you, if Big Pharma gets involved, there will be so many trials, your head will be spinning. I will also tell you that every commercial on TV is going to be BPC 157. And if you're not taking it, you probably should leave the country because you don't belong with us because you're not on BPC 157, the typical pharma playbook. And so, again, yes, the funding's just not there. I talk to people from all over the country. I'm actually the incoming president of a group called Society for Brain Mapping, and we have a couple thousand members all over the world. And this is just the way it is. We know what works and what doesn't work amongst experts. We're not relying on influencers, right, to make these decisions. We're relying on other experts that have been at the forefront of these things and doing it. The next thing I'll say about the pushback on some of these things is, first of all, those of us that are doing it that are highly trained in general in medicine and have studied, like I said, all these different disciplines, We are actually, if anybody is going to be the ones that are giving it to people, we are the ones that's why physicians can do a lot of things off label, because we have the expertise and we need to make decisions based on safety profiles and potential risks, right? So this is what I'll say. When it comes to a lot of these peptides, right? And you can push back all you want. Please, I want to hear the comments. When it comes to these peptides, what's interesting to me is if you look at their safety profile, and then you compare their safety profile to the typical pharmacological thing, right? Whatever medicine you want to pick. So let's say the neurotropics, the brain health peptides. If you compare the brain health peptides, let's just say to a psychiatric medicine for depression, the the difference in the safety profiles it's dramatic. It's dramatic because you're not going to get even a fraction of the stuff that you're going to get, for example, from an SSRI, from some of these other. Again, I'm not telling you to use these. I'm not. You talk to your own providers. But again, for those of you that are pushing back on the whole peptide thing and saying, "Oh, it's they're not FDA approved," that this, and that, and the other thing. I get that. I know that. But again, I'm looking at safety profiles. I'm talking to people all over the country before even rolling out. It's true. There are people that want to be the first to use it. But I can tell you when it comes to peptides, like if you're starting to use peptides on your patients today, you are very late. I mean, you're like, people have been doing this for a long, long time. Those are the people that I go to, no different, than when it came to, doing the light therapy stuff, which we can talk about. But anyway, that combination absolutely is a lot safer than a lot of things in traditional Western medicine. So let's move on. Okay. So insurance trap. Here's a great question. If my health insurance refuses to cover things like light therapy, mitochondrial testing, or high dose IVs, doesn't that mean it's all unproven snake oil? Okay, well, that's a great question. Thank you for that one. So here's the situation. Let's take photobiomodulation, because that one is one of the most studied. 7,000 articles on light therapy, right? I gave a TED talk on photobiomodulation at Harvard TEDx. Guess who was asking all the questions afterwards? Some of the healthcare providers that they were so intrigued. As soon as then they look at the studies, you know what they say? Oh my God, this is real. Why aren't we doing this? The side effect profile on utilizing whole body photobiomodulation is so tiny that the government organizations classify photobiomodulation as clinically insignificant risk, but yet insurance refuses to cover it. So I will tell you, I'm going to just leave it here with the insurance thing. We have so many things that can help you to lead better lives, to re-energize your batteries, to get your cells functioning better, your mitochondria functioning better, all these great things that we can do. And they're not covered by insurance because they're under the alternative care basket, which makes no sense. But yet they have tremendous studies behind them, right? Now we have to think, why is that? What is the motive behind that? Could it possibly be because if those things were covered, less people would be sick, and therefore less people would go to the same well of pharmacological interventions, surgical interventions, and others? We have to think, approving these things, is it good for the medical system, which is an absolute machine, just churning things, churning, or is it not good for the medical system because there's going to be a lot of lost revenues, right? So that when we keep people healthy, which is everything I preach, when we prevent them from needing high level intervention care, right? Costs come down, but people make less profits. So that is one of the biggest reasons why there's an insurance trap. Now, the other reason why insurance companies don't, approve certain things to be paid for by insurance is because they then utilize the excuse, there's no random, there's no random controlled trials, all this stuff. I get that. but if people are using it, it's safe. There's article after article after article on some of these other things. I'm not talking about photobiomodulation. There's all kinds of trials on photobiomodulation, but some of these other things where there might not be as strong of evidence as far as randomized control, if they're safe, if providers are using them, if people are using them anyway, it's a complete disservice to the patients not to cover these things, because honestly, I have seen some of the biggest turnarounds in people that have chronic health conditions that I ever have in my entire life, ever since I started treating them with biohacking strategies, detoxification, all this other stuff. And so it's really really heartbreaking to see that there are a subset of people that can't afford this stuff, and unfortunately we see them, and they literally they can't afford. I mean, some of the people can't afford, they're just trying to figure out where their next meal is. Guess what? They would benefit dramatically from these things. They have insurance, it doesn't cover it. So what do they get randomized to? They get randomized to another prescription, right? Some of them have so many they can't even count anymore, right? More interventions, this and that, and we could have prevented it, all that. So we're really hurting people by not allowing this stuff to be covered by insurance. And it is something we're just going to keep fighting for. We're going to keep going down to DC lobbying. We're going to keep working with other organizations to really try to push this through. Once with like this next year, upcoming year, as the president of Society for Brain Mapping, I'm really going to push for a lot of these technologies. And at our meetings, I mean, we talk about so many different technologies that are safe, effective, and yet are not covered by insurance companies. And then again, doctors don't talk about them, patients don't ask for it, or either because they don't know or because they don't have the money. So it's a vicious cycle, and it's hard to get places. So you see why I'm so fired up and passionate about getting the messages out, because if we don't talk like this, you won't know. You don't even you won't know you're being screwed unless somebody tells you you're being screwed. That's an insider. Right. I remember the thing with the bank, with Wells Fargo, where they were charging people all that money, like with their checking accounts. And then it turned into this whole big deal. You didn't know until somebody brought it up. You just kept paying your fees. And so we have to stand up and bring it up. And the only way to do it is by people that are insiders telling you kind of, what's going on. Okay. Next question. Here's a stem cell question that's really cool. Everyone wealthy is flying to Panama or Colombia for stem cell treatments and NAD plus IVs. Are these real longevity secrets of the 1% or just expensive placebos? This is a really good question, and it tells us kind of where people are. And I'm glad that this person was curious to ask these things. Okay, so first of all, I don't know many people that are flying to other countries to get NAD plus IVs. I mean, because those are pretty popular here in the States. There's a lot of clinics doing that. NAD specifically, I'm going to focus more on the stem cell stuff, but NAD specifically, that targets complex 1 of the mitochondrial wall. You know how much I talk about mitochondria, and that it can help in stimulating the electron transport chain to work better. I like to call, NAD is mitochondrial food. It kind of plunges around 40 and it's down from there. So replacing your NAD is something that we definitely recommend. I think I talked about it on a recent show. NAD is something that it's actually a dinucleotide, and it does like fantastic stuff. It carries, it basically grabs an electron, gives it to the electron transport chain, and then we're off to the races making fuel for our cells. So absolutely, I think NAD is great. NAD is not that expensive. It is certainly not a 1% thing. We have people getting NAD drips that, that's all they can afford is NAD drips, but it's worth it because of the, the potential benefits. Let me talk about stem cells and traveling abroad for a second, and then I want to just talk about the whole 1% thing. It's really important for you guys to know, because there's like so much misinformation that comes with that. So traveling abroad. So here's the situation. In the United States, there are specific laws where we cannot manipulate cell lines. Okay. This has changed a little bit in Florida. It's not like completely open in Florida, but the laws are a little bit different in Florida. And I think it's going to change nationally. So what's happening now is what a lot of folks are looking for are what we call day 0 cells. There's cells that are taken from the placenta. You take these cells, you replicate the best cell lines that you can find, right? Because you have a choice. And now you have like just these what we call day 0 cells. And those cells can be given either for, in a specific location through injections, or they can be given what we call systemically through the entire body. And some people, overseas, none of this is done in the US, by the way, but some of them are giving them what's called intrathecally, which is in the fluid around, like in the spinal cord, in the spinal fluid around the spinal cord for certain conditions, and diseases. And there's some controversy around that stuff. We don't need to get into all that. Here's my take on general stem cell stuff. I had Neil Riordan, the founder of the Panama Stem Cell Clinic, on my show. They're doing incredible things. They've treated something like, 30,000 people. They're going a crazy number of people with very, very low side effects, and nothing bad, like nothing catastrophic, happened there. So I think that they're doing really good work, and they're tackling things like people that have had spinal cord injuries and people that have heart disease and systemic stuff. But they're also doing things like injections into joints and spines and things like that. So here's my general take on it. And I talked about it. Please feel free. It's Wellness at the Speed of Light's my podcast. Neil Riordan is the guy. Watch the podcast. We really go into it if you're more curious. But here's my general take. If you are looking to have, and this becomes really expensive, unfortunately, if you have a serious chronic condition and you have made a decision that you want to get these systemic stem cells, then yes, unfortunately, this starts to get into the people need to have a substantial amount of money. It's not easy to travel abroad and stay in hotels for a week or 2 weeks or wherever you're going to stay and then get these treatments. But yeah, we can't offer them here in the States until the laws change. So that can be, definitely limiting. On the flip side, if you have a musculoskeletal problem, so for example, if you have a bad shoulder, a bad knee, a bad hip, a bad spine, whatever it is, or injury to a tendon, then using what's called autologous stem cell therapy, your own stem cells, taking your own stem cells either from your bone marrow or your fatty tissue and then injecting them into those areas, has tremendous success. And do shows upon shows on every single individual body part and how you would approach it with stem cells and what the success is. So that was kind of my pushback on the whole stem cell stuff. I get it. Longevity, all these diseases, if you have multiple sclerosis, all these other things. If you want to do stem cells and you're interested in that, please do your own research, talk to their doctors, and you can figure out if you want to do that. But for run-of-the-mill musculoskeletal problems, there are tremendous options for stem cell, treatments. Here, we do them in our clinic at the Institute for Regenerative Medicine. Dr. Sager, triple board certified pain management specialist, been doing this for 30 years, can put stem cells in any nook and cranny, possible, utilizing advanced imaging studies, does like injections within the bones called intraosseous, which has a tremendous track record, for example, in total knee, to prevent total knee replacements. If you have that type of injection, which is inside the bone underneath where the cartilage is damaged, you have less than a 20% chance of needing a knee replacement 15 years later. Okay, that wasn't Dr. Sager's study. That was a guy called Dr. Hernigou, this French surgeon who did one of the best, he's an orthopedic surgeon, one of the best studies ever done because the patients were their own placebo. Got a knee replacement on one side, got stem cells on the other side. The side that got the stem cells, they did better, and less than 20% of them even needed a knee replacement in 15 years. In 15 years, not in 15 days, 15 months, in 15 years. So it's really huge. All right, let's move on briefly. We just have a minute here before we go on to the other side of the break. I'm just looking through some of your comments. Here's another one, same thing. Let me go back to that since we have a minute. Here's the bottom line. You can, when it comes to longevity, you can just make significant lifestyle choices, add certain supplementation, but getting a consultation and having a blueprint done is absolutely the best way to go because we can really help you. And then you can start adding on from there. Generally, biohacking there's some expense to it, but it is not it's not the most expensive, thing in the world. And people can afford it of all walks of life. Not everybody, but there's so many people that can afford that. Then you start getting into certain specific detoxing protocols like ozone therapy and transcranial magnetic stimulation and all kinds of other more advanced things like stem cells, yes, it starts to get more limiting, but it's definitely not confined to the 1%. If you're curious on these things, please reach out, because I'm telling you, we can formulate strategies for all types of budgets. That's just not for me. I'm talking about for other clinics that are doing this stuff. So we'll pick up on that. We'll pick up on a couple other things on the other side of the break. This is Recharging the Human Battery Radio. We are on AM 950. This is Dr. Sinicropi. See you in a minute. Welcome back to Recharging the Human Battery Radio. I'm Dr. Sinicropi. We're on AM 950 Radio. This has been fun. I mean, listen, I'd have to do 10 shows in a row to answer all your questions. I think the next show I do, I'm going to just pick up on, there's just so many different questions you have on and as you know, we talk about so many different, ideas and topics on the show. You could imagine the amount of questions, and I'm telling you, they're at this point, they're in the thousands as far as like what's out there. So it's hard to pick and choose, but we'll continue going through this. I want to talk about a concept that has come up recently, and I did get a questions because people are asking me now about kind of these private concierge kind of services that a lot of docs are doing, and it's something that now I am doing with a certain group of people. Why is this such a growing thing? Now, you heard me, we kind of went over the questions we had. Sorry, I wish I'd gotten through more, but again, those are the type of questions we get bombarded with every day because people don't know how to navigate the system. So I will tell you this: there are so many people that are lost navigating the system that almost the best thing that people can do is pick a provider that then is their coach and coaches them through their entire health journey. This is becoming really popular. I've had many people on my podcast that are doing this, from OBGYNs to heart doctors, all kinds of stuff. And so why is this something we're doing? And the pushback sometimes is, well, not everyone can afford it. So, like, why would you do that? Well, this is what I'm saying. Like, we're trying to help as many people as possible, right? Not everybody is going to be able to afford this or that. Not everybody can afford a certain type of car or to live in a certain type of place. We are trying to help absolutely everybody. That's my mantra. We're trying to make changes at all kinds of levels to get you the care that you need. But the reason for the coaching for those people that can want to invest in themselves or whatnot, I can tell you that even people that have means, when either they get into significant health issues, they're not doing well, or they have a family member that ends up in the ICU or is sick or something like that, I am the questions that I get from folks, whether it be through social or them reaching out to me directly or having direct conversations, it's insane. They are so lost. They're so frustrated. The communication gaps between them and the people that are taking care of either themselves or their family members can be so wide. What does a kind of a physician coach do? Right? That's a different thing than being somebody's doctor. It's like, then sometimes people just want a doc to help them through it. What do? Well, number one, they can help to formulate a blueprint for your life. So we're not talking about a strategy for a month. We're talking about a strategy for 6 months or 12 months or 5 years, whatever it is, and then just guide you through that. But also being able to translate, because to so many people, it's as if the medical system is speaking a different language. And so if you go there and you speak English and the people are talking to you in Japanese, you're probably not going to understand much of it. So these physician coaches and guides that can help people along that path can then translate that Japanese for you back into English, so if you're actually getting good consent, if you should go ahead with this procedure, if should you do that or whatever. And it's just basically a counsel or guide. It's no different than hiring a CPA to guide you through your taxes, or you can just do them on TurboTax and take the chance that you don't know what you're doing and you get audited by the IRS and you're kind of screwed. And so this is why these are growing. This is, by the way, one of the questions I've been getting recently, because I have been talking more about this physician coaching, and I really like, and I think actually more physicians should think about doing physician coaching to patients or to other physicians, frankly, and also, physician assistants, nurse practitioners, those that are experts in this to help guide people along. All right, our time is up. I'm going to pick up on more questions next week because I have dozens of them here to go through. This is Recharging the Human Battery Radio. I'm Dr. Sinicropi. This has been fun. We're on AM 950. We'll see you guys next week for another incredible show.